They are a legendary house in the world of ice and fire, though relatively young by the standards of Westeros. So what is the history of House Baratheon? Hi everyone, this is Robert. Welcome to In Deep Geek. If you like theories, background, history and lore about A Song of Ice and Fire, The Lord of the Rings and The Witcher, this is the place for you. Welcome. This is another collaboration with the excellent History of Westeros. Please do check out their podcast and YouTube channel. There's a link down below. Despite their prominence as a great house, and a royal house at that, the Baratheons are relatively new in Westeros. Only 3 centuries before A Song of Ice and Fire, House Baratheon of Storm's End was founded from 2 ancient and powerful houses, both of them royal, plus one other currently unknown lineage. The first known Baratheon was Orys Baratheon, the alleged but accepted bastard son of Lord Aerion Targaryen of Dragonstone and an unknown mother. Her surname may have been Baratheon. Bastards in Westeros, of course, are normally given names like Snow, Storm, Rivers and so on, depending on where in Westeros they are raised. Those born in King's Landing or the Isles of Blackwater Bay are usually called Waters, but perhaps pre-invasion Dragonstone and the Targaryens may have been a bit different. Baratheon might mean the descendant of somebody called Theon, or perhaps a play on the rough Greek translation of Barrier to the Gods, or perhaps George R. R. Martin just chose a cool name and didn't think too deeply about it. He openly admits he isn't a philologist like Tolkien. If I had to guess, it's probably the latter. In any event, baby Orys seems to have picked up little of the Targaryen look, being big, muscly, black of hair and black of eyes. The seed is strong, as will become important much later. We don't know what kind of a relationship Orys had with Visenya or Rhaenys, but it's reported that as youths, he and Aegon became best friends, the only true friend of his youth, and also his champion. Orys was said to be fierce in battle, as both a fighter and commander. Immediately prior to the outbreak of war, King Argilac Durrandon offered his only daughter in marriage to Lord Aegon as a way to placate a potential enemy, but Aegon pointed out that he already had 2 wives and offered Orys in his stead. Argilac was so angered at the suggestion of his daughter marrying a bastard that he cut the hands off the envoy who brought the offer. This breach of diplomatic norms was outrageous, and as Aegon was clearly already considering the conquest, he had to answer. Shortly thereafter, the conquest began, and Orys led the ground troops during the first battle, a victory over the Darklings and Mutons. When Aegon was crowned, Orys was named the first Hand of the King, a dark play on the fact that Argilac had sent back the hands of Aegon's envoy, and tasked with conquering the kingdom that had spurned him. Orys understandably focused first on Argilac, with a large host at his back, and supported by Rhaenys Targaryen and Meraxes. The campaign came to a legendary conclusion at Storm's End, with Orys in single combat against the Storm King, the last Storm King. With Argilac slain by his own hand, Orys took his daughter Argella to wife. Since House Durrandon had ruled the Stormlands for eons untold, Orys opted to keep their black and yellow stag sigil and their house words, "Ours is the Fury." All of House Baratheon descends from this pairing, a Targaryen bastard and the ancient line of Storm Kings. Queen Argella was also black of hair. If there's a magical component to the persistent black hair of House Baratheon, we can't be sure if it came from Orys's line or Argella's. Less persistent but very common among Baratheons are blue eyes. This may have originated with Argella since Orys's were black, but his Valyrian ancestry may also have included strikingly blue-eyed individuals. Orys led the royal armies south for the First Dornish War, and it was a disaster. His knights were caught in a trap and massacred, save for the most valuable. It took 3 years, but they were ransomed at last. However, Lord Will cut the hands off all the prisoners just prior to their release. There is a theme here. Orys, like Jaime Lannister, believed a hand should have his hands, and resigned his position. Instead, he turned his thoughts to revenge. 29 years later, he finally got his chance when the Second Dornish War broke out, the year after Aegon the Conqueror died. In the ensuing campaign, Orys took several wounds, but his men captured Lord Will, the son of the very same Lord Will who cut off his hand. He removed the man's hands and feet, then hung them in his tent, only to die from his wounds on the way home. His son Davos reported that his corpse was smiling. Oris and Argella's eldest grandson, Rogar, was the next notable lord known to us. He led the house during the reign and fall of Maegor the Cruel. It was he who hid Jaehaerys and Alysanne from their uncle Maegor until the time was right. For his role in protecting them and for being the first great lord to declare for Jaehaerys, he was made Hand of the King like his grandfather. He ruled alongside Jaehaerys' mother Alyssa, the Queen Regent, who had also taken shelter at Storm's End after fleeing from Maegor's clutches, so they had known each other for some time. Many saw Rogar as now the true power in the realm, and that power only grew when he and Queen Alyssa were married at the famous Golden Wedding of 49 AC. He then planned to betroth his youngest brother to Alysanne, further tying the two houses together, but she learned of the plan and fled with Jaehaerys to Dragonstone to elope. Lord Rogar was a stubborn man and tried very hard to undo their betrothal. After several failed attempts, he went so far as to suggest sending Jaehaerys to Oldtown to become a maester, with the crown passing to Princess Aeria. He had gone too far. Queen Regent Alyssa, his wife, demanded his resignation, and the entirety of the small council agreed. He left, furious at the embarrassment, and not yet done plotting. He conspired to kidnap one of the princesses and push her claim, but the men he sent were captured in the attempt. At this, he finally gave up and rode to King's Landing. He told the king he wished to take the Black and begged mercy for House Baratheon. But Jaehaerys, the conciliator, did not punish him, on the condition that he became their fiercest man. He quickly agreed and was later reconciled with Alyssa. Alyssa gave birth to a son named Boromund. 3 years later, a daughter named Jocelyn followed. Both had black hair. Storm's End passed to Boromund. Jocelyn was married to Prince Aemon Targaryen, heir to Jaehaerys and Alysanne, and in the year 74, Jocelyn and Aemon had their first and only child, Princess Rhaenys Targaryen, who became known as the Queen Who Never Was. Harkening to the Seed is Strong subplot, Rhaenys did not have the silver-gold hair of ancient Valyria, but the coal-black hair of House Baratheon. In the year 90 AC, Princess Rhaenys, rider of the dragon Meleys, married Lord Corlys Velaryon, the Sea Snake. You'll know all about her and him from House of the Dragon. She was passed over for the Iron Throne, as were her children, despite being the eldest child of the king. At which point, we should probably pause to acknowledge that the Targaryen, Velaryon, Baratheon family trees at this moment are rather complex, as was often the case with the Targaryens. But the Baratheons, like the Velaryons, were very clearly one of the top 3 houses in Westeros, just behind the Targaryens, and often married into them, hence their family trees becoming so confusing. Jocelyn and Lord Boromund, not to mention Queen Alysanne herself, were angered that Rhaenys' claims, including those of her children, were dismissed more than once, and the throne eventually passed to Viserys I after a great council. We often tend to think of the Dance of the Dragons as not being a very Baratheon-centred war, but they were completely enmeshed in the Targaryen family tree by this point. Hence, it's no surprise that the first real action of the dance was for the two sides to send emissaries to the Baratheons seeking their support, and try to marry them into the royal family once more. Lord Boros chose to betroth one of his daughters to Prince Aemond, pledging himself to the Greens. However, that marriage never happened, and instead the Baratheons largely kept to themselves until finally emerging to attempt to restore order to the capital after Rhaenyra had been hounded out. At which point, Lord Baratheon doubled down and betrothed another of his 4 daughters, Cassandra, to King Aegon II of the Greens, and a third daughter, Floris, to Lord Larys Strong. Lord Boros then subdued the Crown lands, and under orders from the king, inflicted heavy demands for taxes and levies, which were met with an angry submission. He tried to quell this insubordination, but was killed in the attempt in what became known as the Muddy Mess. It turned out to be the last significant battle of the dance. House Baratheon survived, but was much diminished in status for the next while. Though we know they remained loyal to the throne throughout the Blackfyre rebellions, as of yet we have no specifics on that. But as we look to the time of Dunk and Egg, there is again much to be said about House Baratheon. The famous Laughing Storm, Lionel Baratheon, was a major feature of the Hedge Knight short story, voluntarily fighting alongside Sir Duncan the Tall in his Trial of 7, in large part because he wanted to test himself against the Kingsguard. Sir Lionel, heir to Storm's End at the time, was of typical Baratheon size with volume to match, with black hair and blue eyes, of course. The friendship between Sir Duncan, Prince Aegon and the Laughing Storm seems to have continued, at least to some degree. In the year 237, 28 years after the tournament of Ashford Meadow, one of Lord Lionel's daughters was betrothed to the heir to the throne, Prince Duncan the Small. But Prince Duncan the Small famously gave up his claim to the Iron Throne and his betrothal to Lady Baratheon so that he could marry the mysterious Jenny of Oldstones. Lord Lionel was so angered by this that he named himself the new Storm King and declared independence. Seriously, he started a civil war over this. There was much bloodshed in a short period of time, but it ended with a challenge. Rather than more deaths, Lord Lionel agreed once again to settle things by fighting the Kingsguard. This time, instead of 7v7, it was 1v1, with Sir Duncan the Tall again in the spotlight. It must have been quite a duel, but it was for honour's sake, not to the death. Sir Duncan prevailed and peace was restored. A new arrangement was made. Lionel's heir Ormond was betrothed to Aegon V's daughter Raelle. This time there were no complications, and in 246 their first child, a son named Steffon, was born. Though House Baratheon descended in part from House Targaryen, this was a renewal, so to speak, of that connection. And that Targaryen connection became vitally important less than 40 years later when Robert Baratheon took the throne. Ironically, his father Steffon served at court and became friends with Prince Aerys, the future Mad King that his son would depose. The two of them and Tywin Lannister fought on the Targaryen side in the War of the Ninepenny Kings on the Stepstones. Lord Ormond Baratheon was named overall commander by King Jaehaerys II, but he was mortally wounded by none other than Maelys the Monstrous Blackfire, and died in Steffon's arms. Barristan the Bold avenged his liege lord by slaying Maelys later in the campaign. This gives us another angle to Robert's pardon of Sir Barristan. Sir Barristan killed the man that killed Robert Baratheon's grandfather. Lord Steffon married Lady Cassana Estamont, and they had 3 children. Robert in 262, Stannis in 264, and Renly in 277. HBO gave many people the wrong impression here. Book Stannis and Renly are very tall and black-haired. Stannis' eyes are very blue, while Renly's are blue-green. Robert was every bit the classic Baratheon, tall, loud, a genuine lover of combat without cruelty, blue-eyed, black-haired. According to Ned, he was muscled like a maiden's fantasy. And Stannis and Renly are similar, different personalities, but the same classic Baratheon look. At some point, Robert was sent to the Vale of Arryn to foster with Jon Arryn, where he became friends with Eddard Stark. The year after Renly's birth, Lord and Lady Baratheon were sent by King Aerys to find a bride for Prince Rhaegar in the Free Cities. Robert was visiting Storm's End when his parents returned from Essos, and was standing on the battlements with Stannis watching their ship, the Windproud, sail homeward, only for a sudden storm to sink the ship, leaving only Patchface the Fool to survive, and Robert as the 16-year-old Lord of Storm's End. Though Lord and old enough to rule in his own right, 16-year-old Robert decided to continue fostering with his father figure, Jon Arryn. Not long after, he was betrothed to his best friend's sister Lyanna, whom he had very much fallen for, though the feeling was not mutual. Lyanna took note of what so many others turned a blind eye to regarding Robert. For example, he had already fathered Mia Stone, and for that reason and others, she eloped with, or was kidnapped by, depending on your perspective, but I'm clearly in the former camp, Rhaegar Targaryen, which was the final catalyst for Robert's rebellion. Though we should be in no doubt that Robert's rebellion was him taking the throne by force, the official justification for his claim was real. By dint of his grandmother, he was, depending on how you count it, second or third in line to the throne after Aerys and Rhaegar's deaths. Robert was no Aerys, the Mad King, but his legendary ability to turn foe into friend was not nearly enough to make him a good king. He was indifferent to ruling, far more interested in women, alcohol and feasts, a toxic mix for him which escalated throughout his reign. About 7 years after winning the throne, Balon Greyjoy took note of Robert's weaknesses and judged that the realm would not fight for him, and declared himself King of the Iron Isles. He miscalculated badly, as leading men to war was one of the few things Robert was still good at and interested in. Fathering bastards might have been another of those things. In the end, he fathered probably 16, their royal blood creating a danger for the realm and for themselves. Fortunately, most of them don't know who their father was, and neither did many other people. Probably Varys was the only one to truly keep track. Crucially, they all seemingly possessed the black hair and blue eyes of House Baratheon. The seed is strong. When Brienne first sees Gendry, for example, she briefly thinks that she's looking at Renly. He would be called Gendry Waters if he were known to be Robert's bastard, but that secret is held by very few. He meets Bella at one point. She is also a bastard of Robert's, who also doesn't know it. A sex worker, she offers to sleep with him, but luckily he passes, and an accidental incest doesn't occur. Yet another Baratheon bastard, though this time one who does know his parents, is Edric Storm, whom Robert fathered on Delena Florent in Stannis and Selyse's own marriage bed on the night of their wedding. Edric is very proud that he's Robert's son. With these two, and the rest of Robert's bastards, Stannis at the wall and Shireen foreshadowed for an awful fate, the future of House Baratheon promises to be at least as intriguing as their history has been. House Baratheon may have had a short history by Westerosi standards, but it has never been boring. If you'd like to see more A Song of Ice and Fire videos, please click on the link on the left of your screen. Or if you'd like to support this channel, thank you. There's a link to my Patreon page on the right of your screen. That's all for this time. Thanks for watching. I'll see you again soon.